Welcome to Higher Edification, a podcast featuring college presidents and other higher education leaders talking about the challenges that we face these days in higher education. Higher Edification is a production of Misericordia University, and I'm Dan Myers, the president of Misericordia University and your host. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. We've got something fun today. We've got Mike MacDowell, who was the president of this very university, Misericordia University, as well. There was one president in between us, Tom Boatsman, but Mike was the president for, how many years were you president here?
15.
15, that's what I thought. 15 years Mike was president of Misericordia. And so it's not often you get to have a podcast where you sit down with the president and the prior president to talk about their views of how things are going on in higher education. So I think this will be a really great episode, and we're really looking forward to talking with you today, Mike. The first thing I just wanted to fill our audience in on was just how you came to be a college president. You don't have the exact kind of traditional story for that, but you brought some different kinds of things to the presidency. So why don't you tell us a little bit how you got into the biz?
Well, it was a circuitous route. I got out of the Army and I was going to go to graduate school, and I was going to get a PhD in economics. And the more I looked at economics, I found that it wasn't really my thing. And I went up to North Texas State University because I was with Fort Sam Houston and enrolled there in their master's program. And they had an interesting niche. They were interested in economic education, basically training teachers to teach economics. Texas is a large state, and they just passed an economics mandate. And I got fascinated by how teachers absorbed that information and conveyed it to their students, and I thought it was pretty useful. So I then went up to Ball State and finished up there instead of going to Indiana because they had a program and they wanted me to be the assistant center director, Center for Economic Education. From there I went up to Northern Illinois University, joined the economics department, and was involved with the Illinois Council on Economic Education. From there they asked me to come and be the president of the main operation, Council on Economic Education, New York City. Okay. So I went there in '77, and it was a very good organization. It had, of course, economists on the board and teachers. It also had, since its initiation, key members of the business community. For instance, the fellow who hired me was Dick Heckert, who ended up as chairman of DuPont. Mm-hmm. And I served with Lou Gerstner when he was with McKinsey, and then went finally to IBM. And I studied how these people thought. I wouldn't say studied, I learned from them. And what I found out is that they had a perception of where the country was going and the role of their company in it. I think outsiders give them short shrift. They don't realize how eclectic these leaders are. And what I learned was that they thought seriously about where things were going and developed programs, products, etc., to meet those needs. And so that kind of set me on the trend to think seriously about that. And when I came to Misericordia, the same thing occurred. I looked at where things were going, what the assets of the institution were, and a lot of things made sense. It wasn't brain surgery to come up with the kinds of activities we did. After all, healthcare was a major growing industry, and one could see that coming down the pike. This place had a wonderful tradition for helping students understand the values of the Sisters of Mercy and how to put those values into place every day. And so we just emphasize that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that merges well with the healthcare focus as well. It's a helping profession, right? And
right.
The students who come with that orientation, they are attracted to the Mercy ideals, and they enjoy developing them more while they're here, I think.
They do, and they do a very good job of it. And I think it brings a certain kind of student here, so we don't begin from scratch. But it also hones within them what we called our Trinity of Learning, which was basically high-quality education combined with great career profession, and then career professional development, and then some hard work on serving others. Mm-hmm. Students came with that inclination anyway, but the courses, the faculty, the administration were bent on helping those people serve others well. And so it just made sense to capitalize on that. And I think that tripartite operation worked pretty well in attracting students.
Well, you started a lot of, I don't know if there was anything going on in healthcare when you came, but you started a lot, and Misericordia has kind of become known as a health sciences kind of power over the years. But what were the ones that you started when you came?
Well, I wouldn't say that I started. They really had a pretty good reputation. It was hard to go to a doctor's office or a hospital and not find at least 3 nurses who were alumni of Misericordia. It was also, they had invested in occupational therapy before it became popular and moved from there into physical therapy.
I see.
They even had a 4-year medical imaging program, which is odd because most community colleges have 2-year medical imaging. But most of the people who graduated there ended up running these medical imaging clinics. And then we started speech and language pathology, which grew substantially, and a variety of other activities within those contexts. We looked carefully at other kinds of programs, such as, physician's assistant, PA we have now. Interesting, when we started the physician assistants, we had a long-time nursing program. The nurses were not happy with that because they saw it as a competition.
Right.
And so what we did, I put them in a car, we hauled them down to Geisinger and had breakfast with the president of Geisinger, and he brought in the people who are heading up nursing and PA at the breakfast. And those 2 people spent most of the breakfast arguing with one another who was going to do the work because they had way too much to do. And all of a sudden the faculty said, well, maybe this isn't a bad idea. And so the PA program developed from that.
That's great. Yeah, we had a PA in nursing at Marquette when I was there too, and there was this a sort of tension about the overlapping space, but we finally got them together by building a new building for them together to share this space, and that seemed to help. When you put something substantial on the table, it can make a difference. The healthcare stuff has been really great. It's speech language pathology is just a terrific program, one of our very best, and really one of the best around, I think. The people leading it do such a terrific job. So that's kind of on the academic side of developing the university. But then there's student life things too, and I know you were instrumental in increasing the amount of athletics that happened here at Misericordia. Could you tell us a little bit how all that happened?
Well, again, that wasn't brain surgery by any means. The students who came here, because a goodly percentage, not all, about 33% were in health science, came in with an athletic bent. And so we had good students who were pretty good athletes. Division III is a wonderful concept because it helps students do the right thing, that is athletics for athletics' sake. And quite frankly and pragmatically, you can't give them any more money than you would a regular student. So they come in and they actively participate. Athletes are less apt to drop out of college, and it brings in income and way above the expense. So we always looked at marginal revenue, and it made eminent sense to expand. I guess the largest program we started was football. Starting football at a former women's college is never easy, but I was very impressed with the way the faculty got behind it. They understood too, because some of their best students were athletes, that this would expand, and it did. I know we thought maybe the Sisters of Mercy would be opposed. Not at all. They wanted to go to the games. They were all ready to go. So we had a good experience with football, and of course it brought in a goodly number of students and bumped enrollment. Since we had these fixed costs across all our departments, a standard, very solid core curriculum, and majors that were not fully employed, such as business, etc., football players tended to fit in that niche, so it made eminent sense to do it. But in all of those instances, we looked at what were our comparative advantages, how to exploit those comparative advantages, and how to remain true to the values of the institution. If it met those criteria, then we looked at that kind of program.
Yeah, it's tough out there right now, and everybody's struggling. I think that the kernel or the root cause is that there's just fewer traditional age high school students in the United States right now, and this area of the country is the decline's even steeper. Yeah. And so everybody's kind of struggling to deal with that. I mean, if you were a college president right now, what would you be thinking about doing? What do you see out on the horizon? I know you still pay a lot of attention, and you are very consistently writing op-eds about higher education. It's great to see you still so engaged in what's going on. I'm curious what you would be doing, what maybe advice you'd have for me or other college presidents about what to do in this kind of pickle that we're in right now.
Well, it is a significant pickle, if you will. And it's not only demographics, it's also opinion about college education across the board. I mean, Gallup shows 36%, only 36% of the public has much faith in higher education. Part of that is our own fault as an institution, not as a single institution, but as higher education as a business. We've become very expensive. You and I wrote an op-ed together about Division I colleges, universities. They're dissimilar from us in many ways, but their rates increased 62% in less than 15 years. And when people read about this in the paper, they paint us with a broad brush. We're just like them. Right. The other factor is we have a tendency to shoot ourselves in the foot by not paying attention to what the general public feels is interested in. It gets back to what I was saying earlier about these perceptive CEOs who saw what was coming down the pike before it came. When you have 3 Ivy League presidents or 2 Ivy League presidents and president of MIT on television saying the things they did, people begin to wonder about what goes on in college. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't take too long before it trickulates down to grandparents and parents and to the kids. Why should I go to college if I'm going to be instilled with values that I don't believe in and pay a great deal of money to come up with something a degree which may not have an ROI that I choose to participate in?
Yeah.
So I think the thing you do is to look carefully at new programs, and I know you've brought in somebody to do just that and scientifically look at them. Right. I would not just take verbatim what the latest faculty genre is. They'll come and say, I've got the program that's going to save the university. Set up a system for analyzing that. Mm-hmm. Look at the ROI, and then make an investment. And I think that's what served us well. We grew the student population significantly, and we did so by bringing in the same kind of student who had always done well here, who had the values that people shared here, and that helped move the place forward.
Yeah. Well, I think that understanding the market thing is very important, and just starting a program because it sounds like a good thing or an interesting thing to study, that's not what we can do these days. Yep. And there's a couple of different things in the market you got to understand. I mean, you have to understand what the job market is on the other end for these people, so
yep.
It's something that they can actually be employed successfully doing. You've got to understand the student market, like coming in the door. Do people want this? There's some jobs out there that there's plenty of opportunity. Yeah. Anybody with a degree could get a job like that, but students don't want that. They don't want to do that, and so it's hard to get that to happen. And then just trying to understand what the employers are going to be looking for specifically in the kids when they're coming out. So that sort of element. Those are all things that have to be thought through very carefully when you're designing a new program, and you can't do it on intuition. You've got to go out there and get some data.
Do the research, and get it done. The other thing is you've got to have students coming in who understand that the basic core curriculum and the other courses they take add to their desirability in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Clearly, somebody with a degree in nursing right now is going to find a job. But it would be really helpful if that person had some capabilities, understand how to organize things, how to work with people, etc. And that's what a liberal arts education gives you. And I think that the combination of those two things make for an excellent graduate. And I do not think that we should give all credibility to the major or the program. I think it's developing within each student the ability to communicate, the ability to lead, the ability to accept responsibility, the ability to look forward and see what's coming down the pike and make decisions. And I don't think we spend enough time doing that in most institutions. Misericordia did and continues to do it. I give the faculty full credit for that because they understand that.
Well, those are skills that are going to benefit you over the length of your career,
Sure.
too. If you really want to progress and
right.
move up the ladder in your career, those are the things that are going to make the difference because you need those in a special way to start to manage a team or to become someone who's directing an organization.
Yeah.
Those are things that you need beyond the basic skills of nursing or accounting or whatever it is.
Historically, we had a program in medical imaging here, which is usually a 2-year degree. Nuns were smart enough to make it a 4-year degree. Not only do students stay here 2 years, but 2 additional years, but most importantly, they're the ones 3 years later who are running these sophisticated operations in hospitals and clinics,
right.
and they have the management skill to do it. I think that's very important. The other factor I think that's important is that we look at college debt, and this is one of my prerogatives right now, as just that, a debt instead of an investment. Clearly, college is not inexpensive, and it will remain so. However, if you go at this systematically, if you graduate in the time allotted, 4 years, your debt is somewhat minimized, and indeed, in many instances, minimized to the extent that you can pay it off easily with your first job. We got people who, less than 45% of the students in this country graduate a 4-year degree in 4 years. 5.5 years, and then they look back and say, well, why did I incur this debt? Oh my God, for every additional year in college, you're enduring another quarter, another fifth of your debt.
Right.
And so I think when faculty here pay attention to graduation rates, help students through, makes a big difference. And I think a lot of colleges are coming to that conclusion.
Right, and we're seeing a lot of pressure to compact the degree and to try to make sure things are efficient when people transfer, to make sure they're not losing any more credit than they absolutely have to, and so that's all to the good. I mean that helps the student and it helps the institution. So that's important. I was going to ask you about something about the debt. What was it now? Well, you were saying it's not that much debt. But people will throw these things at you with, somebody with $200,000 in debt and a degree in ancient Roman pottery or something. One of our politicians said that to me once, and he was just quoting someone else. It wasn't his opinion, but he's like, "Well, this is what you hear. What do you say to that?"
You say that was not very good decision making on the part of the parents and the part of the students, and you try to instill in those students some analysis to also think forward. What is going to be the ROI, rate of return investment, on the time that I'm spending and on the money that I'm spending? And they may have a real interest in Roman pottery, but going to Italy for 2 years and taking out a loan to do so is not going to serve them very well. The pottery will be there whether they are or not.
Well, when people talk about ROI with education too, there's a lot of focus on the salary part, and sometimes I get a little bit worried that we spend too much attention on that, and if all we care about is how much money we're going to make, we're going to run out of teachers and some other very important elements in our society pretty darn quick, And so I wonder about that. Have you thought about that, and how do we balance the value of people's contributions through life with the money part and, with the investment they're making?
Well, you're right. And part of my personal issue as a president was that people, oh my God, you're an economist, you think like an economist. I had a friend John Siegfried, who was Secretary Treasurer of the American Economic Association, and he was at Vanderbilt. He got a grant from the Sloan Foundation to run around the country and ask college presidents who were economists, and believe it or not, after a generic degree in higher ed, etc., there are more presidents with a degree in economics and other fields. And his conclusion after doing this was, all of these presidents use economics. The dumb ones tell the faculty, the smart ones don't. And that sums it up. So you're absolutely right. When I speak, the first thing people say, well, you're just going to sit down, go through a salary table and say this is what you should pursue. That's not true at all. The main thing is to grasp what you can do with your degree, which if you're in the health sciences or other fields is pretty generic, and then how you apply that. And applying it is learning how to react and act in society, to think ahead, to look at different aspects, to reason, to be critical, a critical thinker and a reasoned thinker. And that's what we're looking at Misericordia. That's what this institution produced. Mm-hmm. And so it isn't just baseline salary. It's also happiness. It's also capability of living with yourself, living with others, and having the values that serve you, your community, etc. together.
Mm-hmm. One thing I hope we're producing here are people who are going to be leaders in their community in various different ways. And some of that comes from the values, some of that comes from the training that you get. But I hope that we're sending people out who are going to, get on the board of the United Way in their town, or, do these other kinds of activities that will be really fulfilling to them. And they may or may not draw on their primary expertise,
right.
but they really make an important contribution, and that kind of stuff can be awfully fulfilling too, beyond your paycheck.
Right, and I believe that a lot of places focus in on what their graduates do in community and service, etc. That's great, but it's usually a relatively small percentage of those graduates. Here it's across the board. I mean, if you live by the values of Sisters of Mercy, service, mercy, justice, and hospitality, you live those values. And you always think of ways I can improve my community, improve myself, as well as my occupation.
Mm-hmm. It's been interesting to hear how often you've brought up the values of the institution and the sisters, the charisms of the sisters. And one thing that's been great for me being here is it's just so pervasive and ubiquitous across this environment. I mean, I really believe if I stopped any student on the quad and asked them what the charisms of the sisters were, they'd be able to tell me.
Yep.
And I don't think there's a lot of places where the mission of the university is understood that well.
I think that's part of the problem with the perception of higher education today. Mission is something that's written, put in the catalog and forgotten. Mm-hmm. When you have a mission that is endemic to the institution, that pervades everything you do, people on your board who think that way, people who ask questions about it, then I think it keeps the institution focused on what's important. And we can make jokes about mission, etc. It's not a joking matter. It is really stated what this institution does and how it performs. And I think we measure ourselves that way. I mean, the other Mercy colleges are measured in sense of carrying on the mission of our founders. I think that's very important. Most institutions, even if they are still private, have come pretty far away from their original founders. And if they're a public institution, the mission is stated and soon forgotten. Mm-hmm. And so I feel that we're very fortunate to have this kind of mission. And it's pervasive, it's eclectic. Quick story, when I was selected as president, we had 2 monsignors on our board, 2 priests, wonderful men, Jack Bendick and he talked to Monsignor MacDowell, and they were trying to decide who was going to tell the bishop they hired a non-Catholic as president of a Catholic institution. And I said to them, well, I understand your problem, but you've had some issues here. And for 2 years or for several years, you had an interim, you had to fire some presidents. You brought in an interim, he did a great job. He was a Lutheran pastor. I said, I was raised Episcopalian, I split the difference, so they hired me.
So you're not as good as a Catholic, but not as bad as a Lutheran.
Catholic light. Anyway, so
great.
that, and not only was it, and that's a good story, but it also says a lot about the kinds of people who served on our board, who kept the traditions, were very solid and impressed with where we were going, but weren't impressed with themselves. And I think that really served. We had some tremendous lay leadership, as well as the sisters.
Yes. Yeah. Well, our board is just
First rate.
fabulous. Yeah, I've been so supported and pleased working with them every single day. It's been wonderful. And I wish that for every college president out there. But I do think the mission thing is so critical. And I think you're right that most places it's just a piece of window dressing. And I don't think if you ask even faculty members on most campuses what the mission of the university is, they could say much more than trying to be a good university, which everybody's doing that. So
Research and teaching.
yeah, research. No, it's not research and teaching. It's teaching and research, Mike. Come on.
Yeah, it's research and teaching at most, and that's one of our issues.
Yeah. You have to have that argument. But yeah, well, that's another important balance in this world that we're in, is how to make those things work together and have a vibrant intellectual life, and at the same time, remember that what we're here to do, certainly at this institution, is to educate students and to be a part of their ongoing development. So, but that intellectual piece is important too, and it's good to have people working on things that are pushing knowledge forward and so forth. But yeah, but knowing what that is and having everybody familiar and sort of rowing in the same direction, I guess, makes a real difference at a place. And I've been at places where there's been a real strong sense of mission and ones where there haven't been, and it is a world of difference.
It is.
It really is.
And it makes the president's job very tenuous, because every time you come up with a new program idea, you measure it against ROI, you measure against your existing costs of faculty, you measure against costs that you're going to incur, but you've also got to overlay that with the mission. And if you're doing something that doesn't fit the mission, it's not going to sit well. And the faculty understand that. Most administrations understand that. And so people come up with ideas that aren't going to fit, and you can pass them by.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's another important thing in this world is to be able to say no to things.
Right.
And to be able to end things that aren't working well, which is another challenge that we have.
That is a major challenge. The book that you're reading by Brian Rosenberg says it very, very well. I don't care what it is, I'm against it.
Yeah.
I think it's easy to continue to add without subtracting, and we know how to add very well. We do not know how to subtract. It's very difficult because you've got your fixed costs, and a lot of those are personnel costs, and no matter what you do, somebody's going to gripe. I mean, it's just right.
I think that's cuts across everyone's lives, but you have to, right? I mean, that no institution can do all things for everyone, and some things just don't work for whatever reason. The faculty complement or the market that's around you, or whatever it is, a local competition. And you've got to be willing to pull the plug on things so you can do the other stuff well.
You do.
Yeah.
And pulling the plug is one of the most difficult things a president has to do.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time saying no, and it ain't easy, but you just got to do it.
Yeah, you do. I mean, your job as president is to protect the long-term viability of the institution,
right.
The long-term success of the institution, and so you get in these spots sometimes though that are not fun. I think
not easy, not easy at all. And I know you haven't been into one of them yet.
Yeah. Well,
It'll come along.
It'll happen.
It'll happen.
Try to stretch the honeymoon out. There definitely have been some challenges already, but it's funny you mentioned Brian Rosenberg's book, and I hope to get you on the podcast, Brian. If you happen to be listening, I'd like to have you come and talk about your book. But when I was reading that book, I had the whole leadership team read it this year. It was kind of our summer read, and it was I was just chuckling about some of the different things that when you change, they're small things.
Yeah.
They're almost trivial, and yet people complain about them. And my favorite one from here so far is when I got here, the carillon bell was ringing 4 minutes early, and at some point I thought, well, maybe we should fix that, make it be on time. We have parents coming out and for tours and things, and the clock's not ringing at the right time. It doesn't seem like the right message, And so I asked the chief of staff to look into how you change the timing on it, because it's an old mechanism. And he did, and we fixed it, and it was ringing on time. And people complained. They liked it ringing early. So we got complaints that we made the clock ring at the right time. So,
well, perfect.
Yeah.
I needn't say anything more. But they do obsess about certain things that, and when you're interesting about mission is it can be tradition hidebound, and you've got to have a mission that's flexible enough so that you don't have people say, oh my God, we can't do that. We've been doing it for 20 years. This is what we do. It doesn't matter that it's costing us more money than it's bringing in. It doesn't matter that it's alienating folk, and it doesn't matter that the public doesn't think much of it, but we're going to do it. It does matter. And if you're not attuned to those kinds of things, you can't move an institution ahead. You're hidebound. And I think that's a lot of higher education is today, a lot of it.
Well, it's understandable, right? I mean, people are comfortable with doing things certain ways. They've been successful at doing them that way. That's why they're here. They're still here. But that's not how we can be and be successful as an institution. And we've got to change and pivot and move forward, or we're going to be one of these 50 schools that have closed down. In the last, just in the last 3 years, there have been 50 private, nonprofit schools with under 5,000 students that have closed.
Right.
And, and I look at almost every single one of them and see opportunities they had to make some changes. They didn't take them.
Right.
And this is what happens, it's particularly in a tough environment like we're in right now.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, across the board, the market works. And you can't continue to produce Model T Fords when Chevrolet is running all over you with a 6-cylinder car that is 3 times as good. And no matter what Henry Ford said, he had to move along. And that's a lot of these institutions do. It's a shame, but when you're at an institution and you're not directly or only indirectly responsible for bringing in the income which runs the place, you can be reflective and thoughtful, but not helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, we hope that things start to pick up here a little bit. It has been a tough time, and every time I'm with a group of presidents, there's a lot of hand-wringing. One of the ideas that people have come up with is trying to do some sort of combination, and a couple people have been successful at doing this, but most of them look like one just kind of taking over another completely.
Yeah. Well,
have you had your eye on any of that mergers and kind of activity? Do you think that's something that's going to help us out, or is that another fantasy solution?
I have never seen one that is a merging of equals.
Uh-huh.
They're absorbed and they're gone.
Yeah.
I saw the one that's absorbed usually has 2 or 3 programs that remain, but most of it die. And the absorbing institution also ends up with a lot of excess capacity, faculty and others who are tenured, and even non-tenured, but practically tenured, administrators who don't want to leave. So it's not optimal. I don't know what the optimal size of an institution is, because there's certainly a lot of small ones that do pretty well. Most of them are highly endowed and can live off of that. But those that aren't and remain small and cannot optimally place resources behind programs that bring in students and indeed instead maintain what doesn't bring in students are destined to dive. It's awful. I say the market works, and people say, oh, and you capitalists, you. The fact of the matter is it does work. And you don't want to be on the downside of that issue.
Yeah, I mean, here's a reality. In our area here, there are quite a lot of colleges, and they're not all going to make it. And in fact, one closed just a couple weeks ago, Clark Summit. And so when that happens, of course, the students get distributed to the other schools, and so they get a little bit stronger by one going under.
Right.
Now, of course, we don't want them to go under, but when it happens, it does have this effect that you're talking about, which is sort of getting us closer to right, and we're not there, but getting us closer to the right size number of institutions and seats for the population that's going to consume the education.
Right. And you also have the public sector, which also is realizing diminishing enrollments, but because of a variety of political reasons and others, are maintained long beyond their economic viability. And, closing a public college is like closing an Air Force base. Nobody stands up for it. If you're in the area. So that's tough too. You have subsidized institutions which are competing with quasi-private institutions. Very difficult. Very difficult indeed.
We certainly have an interesting situation here in Pennsylvania because we have state schools, we have state-assisted schools at Penn State and Pitt, and then we have private schools, and there's a lot of private schools in Pennsylvania.
I think there are more schools per capita in Pennsylvania than any other state in the country.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and so there were 90-some private schools last year. Now, a few have closed now, so we're probably more like 85 or something at this point. But that's a lot of schools for Pennsylvania. And but there's this other quirk, too. I mean, there's a couple of really high-priced private schools, but the reality is because of the way we scholarship and discount, most of the private schools in Pennsylvania are actually cheaper than the state-assisted schools. So it costs students less to go to a Misericordia or a Mount Aloysius or one of these schools than it does to go to Penn State. That's an interesting little...
Yeah, in terms of the net cost.
Yeah, right, because
the net price is lower, but but it's very hard to explain that to people, and that's what the public looks at the list price.
Yes.
The public looks at income from to students from Pell Grants, federal and state grants, etc. And they say, how can you possibly continue to charge the prices you do when you're getting subsidies? They have no idea how much it is, but it is worrisome because everybody's painted with a broad brush.
Yeah.
The kids the graduate who has $65,000 in student loans, took 6 years to graduate, spent 9 months overseas, took half a load for half the time. This is terrible. This is why public and private higher education are not good. That's in the minds of the public.
Right.
And that is very worrisome. Because it paints us with a broad brush.
Yeah, that always irks me when we get tossed in with those extreme cases. There's always some cases on the fringes on either end, and there's also these we always look to Harvard and Penn and Princeton, as exemplars of higher education, and they're just so different from the rank and file institution. I mean, it's kind of nutty to compare us to Harvard in terms of anything.
But it's so easy, again, to get back to public perception of higher education. It's very easy to be discouraging. I mean, Tom Cotton, senator from Arkansas, says, why should an Arkansas truck driver pay for a lawyer to get his education? which means why should we forgive loans when this lawyer's doing very well and the truck driver's paying for it? I think the student loan forgiveness has brought to a head another problem in higher education from the public perspective. People don't think that's good. Either I paid off my student loans, or even if I didn't, why, or if I had no student loans, why should I pay for somebody who took out these student loans? I don't pay for their FHA housing, when they take out a loan. And it's a reasonable question to ask. And when you've got a Department of Education running around trying to try everything in the world to circumvent the Supreme Court's decision that we can't forgive student loans, you got a real mess.
Yeah.
The Department of Education, that's all they do apparently, because they can't even get the FAFSA form correct. And it caused terrible problems by not creating a system whereby people can apply for student aid and know by December 1 how much aid they're going to get. The Congress told them to revise that form. They spent 3 years doing it. They couldn't do it themselves because they were too busy trying to find ways to circumvent the Supreme Court, and instead they come out with a FAFSA form that is completely inept. Can't even do an inflation index. When I taught economics here, I had students who could do an inflation index. They can't come out with a form that completely fouled up. This is my recent bailiwick. I'm a little perturbed about it.
Yeah.
But that led to a lot of closure of colleges.
It did.
Because students have no idea how much.
Devastating.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got bureaucracy that's killing us in many ways. You've got public perception, which is not necessarily on our side, and you've got students and parents and grandparents who question the worth of a college education when they see the cost relative to the benefits, income benefits.
Well, I think it's important for folks to, if I'm going to get a takeaway here, is that, don't think all colleges are the same. Your experience here at a school like this, and there are plenty of them, is going to be very, very different. And the way that we approach the value proposition for students here is very different than you're going to get a lot of places. And we're going to, we're working hard to keep the price down and manageable and to scholarship people as much as we possibly can, help students get through here in a timely fashion too. It makes a huge difference because you're not only paying more when you go to the fifth year, you're also giving up a year of income,
yes,
right?
Exactly. And at the time when you should be building a career.
That's right. So we, think about these things, ask these kinds of questions, try to understand what's really going on at the places that you're interested in attending, and not just go for the shiny new building or the reputation that it's good in something. Try to understand what's really happening there, what the preparation is like for students. I think if you find a place like Misericordia, you'll end up having have a great experience. You'll be more likely to get through and graduate than you will at most schools in a timely way and come out with a lower amount of debt. So, we hope that I hope that I'm living on Mike's legacy at this university by doing all the things that he's talking about and that he invested himself in so much when he was president here. So, I want to thank Mike for joining us. This has been a terrific conversation.
Well,
we hit a lot of great stuff today, Mike, and I really, I always enjoy getting together with you, but it's nice to do it on camera for once.
It is. I guess it is. We'll have to see if it is good. But it is fun, and you're doing a heck of a job. It's not easy in this day and age to come as the president from another location. Meet people where they are and try to lead them forward, because you're suspected right off the bat.
Yeah.
So you're doing a heck of a job. You really are.
Well, thanks. I do love it here, and I think the thing that drives all of that is the spirit that underlies the mission, the values of this place, and they work well for me, and that, I think, makes the whole thing work well for us together doing this Misericordia project.
The students are absolutely the best part of the job, and you spend time with them, you get enlightened once more.
That's right. Alrighty, well, thank you all out there for joining us for this episode of Higher Edification. I'm Dan Myers, the president of Misericordia University, and we've been privileged and overjoyed, really, to have Mike MacDowell, former president of Misericordia. I think you're officially president emeritus now. Is that not
that's
correct?
yes.
And Mike,
That and $5 will get me a cup of coffee in New York.
but Mike continues to be a great presence here at Misericordia, and it's just wonderful to spend some time with him. We hope that you will join us for our next episode, and until then, keep your mission in mind.